Rudolf Steiner and Atlantis. So why is Atlantis important? Rudolf Steiner discusses Atlantis quite a bit. Our understanding of the Atlantis times is important, including its historical path. Most of us know about it through Plato and what he writes about it in his books, and he got the information from an Egyptian priest, etc. It goes back. It's mainly myths, but Steiner's gone up into the Akashic records to discover the true history of Atlantis. And why is it important in our historical path still? Well, this is because the time of Atlantis is part of our human development, and the mystery schools would have also talked about this in their teachings of why Atlantis was so important. The initiates would have been told that there is a spiritual connection between themselves and Atlantis, as there is also for us as initiates. There is a spiritual connection between our own soul and spirit development and the continent of Atlantis. During the Atlantean period, humanity was different to the humanity of today, especially in the very early Atlantean period. And the Atlantean period is going to be went on for a long time, but Steiner says that from the beginning to the end, from the beginning of the Atlantean period, well, humanity was not like it is now. By the end of it, it completely changed. It had developed to become denser. And Steiner calls the early Atlantean period, the people in it, the old Atlanteans. They were still connected with cosmic consciousness. They were still aware, still connected with nature and the growth forces of evolution of humanity and the planet. The Atlanteans originally were the fourth root race, but by the end of their civilization, they were becoming the fifth sub-race of the fifth root race. All sounds a bit complicated, but so there's all these different root races as humanity's developed over time. So in the beginning of the Atlantean period, it was the fourth root race, but as Atlanteans lasted for a very long time and they developed and changed over that time, by the end of the Atlantean period, they become the fifth root race. The old Atlanteans were still linked to nature by their will. And Steiner said, and I'm going to quote here, "At that time, the will of human beings worked magically. It could affect the growth of flowers. When they exerted their will, they could make a flower shoot up quickly, a capacity which can only be acquired today by an abnormal process of development. Hence, at that time, the natural surroundings depended on how the human will was constituted." And as many of you know, I've done many shows on developing your will and how important the will is in our development and in the evolution of ourselves and the planet. Steiner explains that the old Atlanteans had not become as dense in physicality as we are today. They had bodies of a soft and flabby constitution. Those are Steiner's words. According to Steiner, the etheric body was not so firmly bound up with the spiritual, and the very body, from the head, extended far beyond, the etheric body extended beyond our physical body. It was like our aura, our astral body was all around us rather than just connected to us. So the old Atlanteans had these magical psychic forces which allowed them to also lift heavy objects. They could control the life force in plants, especially in the seeds. And Steiner writes about, this is a quote here, "The Atlanteans, however, controlled the actual life force contained in seeds. Think of the life force that causes the blades of grass to sprout from the earth. This life force was extracted from the seed by the Atlanteans and put to use. In their sheds, where the Atlanteans kept their airships, they laid up enormous stocks of seeds, just as today we store coal." So Steiner's talking about all these airships, and that they were driven by the power, the etheric power in the seeds. And those that study anthroposophy know that the etheric side of us is our living force, gives us the ability to be alive and to live. For every living being, creature, seed, plant, animal, fish, whatever, has that, and they knew how to utilize this. As we know, the stories of Atlantis were always accompanied by dramatic tales about how that civilization destroyed itself by misuse of technology, resulting in the sinking of the land. And as Steiner's saying here, they had a lot of technology. They had the technology to, well, airships to fly here, there and everywhere, and to utilise power from other living beings. Steiner said, and I quote, "When the will of the Atlanteans turned to evil and used these forces for egotistical purposes, they simultaneously evoked the forces of water and of air, and they released them, and ancient Atlantis perished as a result." So this evoking of the forces of the water and the air, this was, well, came back upon them. They were misusing all the energies, the magic power that they had. They've invoked, and they were using all this for egotistical purposes, as he says, and they invoked the forces of water and of air. And how do we hear of Atlantis? Atlantis's demise? It was through sinking into the water. The water came back on it. So I'm just going to read that quote again. "When the will of the Atlanteans turned to evil and used these forces for egotistical purposes, they simultaneously evoked the forces of water and of air, released them, and ancient Atlantis perished as a result." Steiner reminds us that, and I'm going to quote again, "Today the most evil forces on the earth are still released when black magicians manhandle forces that are, generally speaking, withheld from mankind. These forces are powerful and at the same time holy. They are forces that in the wise hands of worthy guides can be applied in the highest and purest service of humanity." And, end quote there. This is true, isn't it? We can sense, those of us that are working upon ourselves and trying to wake up, we can sense things are not right. We know there's black magicians out there misusing the forces. And these forces are like the force in Star Wars. It's neutral, and it's how you use it. You could be a good Jedi or a bad Sith Lord. So, and he's reminding us also these forces are powerful, yet at the same time they are holy. They are forces that in the wise hands of worthy guides can be applied in the highest and purest service of humanity. And we need to get that happening again. We need the worthy guides to be able to help people to use these forces in the right way. But this is what happened, Steiner's saying, in Atlantis. He was saying back in the Atlantean times, these forces were misused. The Atlanteans, who were, as I was saying, in the early period of Atlantis, they were soft. They had soft bodies, a flabby constitution, Steiner calls it. But I don't think mean flabby is. In fact, they were just, pliable, plastic-like. But over time, the Atlanteans became denser, and they've lost their connection to these abilities, to what the abilities they had. And in the last days of Atlantis, humanity had developed into 3 types of human beings. So this is the end side of Atlantis, the end of its era. So it's divided the humanity into 3 types of human beings. Those that were going into the 5th root race. Well, everybody's going into the 5th root race, but Steiner says, and I'm quoting here, "One must realise that at the end of the Atlantean period, there existed 3 groups of human beings. First, there were the above-mentioned divine messengers who in their development were far ahead of the great mass of the people and who taught divine wisdom and accomplished divine deeds. Second, there was the great mass of humanity among which the faculty of thought was in a dulled condition, although they possessed natural abilities which modern human beings have lost. Third was a small group of those who were developing the faculty of thought. While they gradually lost the natural abilities of the Atlanteans through this process, they were advancing to the stage where they could grasp the principles of the divine messengers with their thoughts. The second group of human beings was doomed to gradual extinction. The third, however, could be trained by being of the first kind to take its direction into its own hands." End quote. So isn't that interesting about the second group? Those that were, this was a great mass of humanity among which the faculty of thought was in a dulled condition. And Steiner says they were doomed to gradual extinction. Is that what's also happening now? Hopefully we're of the third group who are reaching out to those that are of the higher groups to train and lead us in the right direction. Steiner talks about a special group that was led by an initiated man known as the Great Initiate. So this is coming from Atlantis. This is a group that was led out of Atlantis when it was falling. This group was known as the Sun Oracle, and I'm going to quote now from Steiner. Now in Atlantis there were also centres of culture and ritual which we call the Atlantean oracles, where what is called Atlantean wisdom was harboured and practised. The great leader of the Sun Oracle, the greatest initiate of Atlantis, directed his attention above all to that section of human beings who differed from the ordinary population in ancient Atlantis. So the Sun Oracle and his group, they were looking for hopefully people like us, initiates that need to be led by the sun, to join the Sun Oracle, this great group, and to keep hold of the ancient wisdom. So I'm just going to do a Steiner quote here. Just as at that time the old initiate gathered his host together locally, directing his call to the simple despised people, so today again, under different, not local conditions, a call goes forth from the great masters of wisdom who are allowing certain spiritual treasures of wisdom to flow into humanity. End quote. And that is happening, isn't it? Where the ancient wisdom, the fragments of the ancient wisdom, they're still out there. We're still learning about it, but it's not as occult as it used to be. And we don't need to join a mystery school anymore. We can discover it for ourselves if we want to develop ourselves, if we want to be part of this great group and use it for good, not for the bad, not for materialistic, dense things. Steiner reminds us in this quote, in Atlantis long ago it was a matter of finding the connection with the physical material world. The task today is to discover the spiritual again. End quote. And that is a big task. Many people are not interested in the spiritual. They're just living for the physical material world. Hopefully people that are watching my show is because you're looking to discover the spiritual within yourself and reconnect with the divine, again. And there's hope for all of us, because this is what they're saying, that those that have this kind of need, want, desire, aim, it will be fulfilled. We will return to the divine. We will develop and evolve because we are on the right course to go upwards. Steiner says the survivors of Atlantis split up and went in different directions, to the Americas, to Europe and to Africa. The Sun Oracle group gathered certain people to develop themselves, and when the catastrophe occurred back in Atlantis, they took themselves off to Asia, a place where many believe Shambhala can be found.